This is your Daily 5 for Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. Along with Tetsuo the Iron Man, for our commentary films this week, Lando and I watched another movie that feels very similar to Tetsuo. In fact, I thought it was the same director because I haven't seen this movie in quite a while either. I did talk about this movie back on episode 35. I don't even know. I think I looked it up. It was 16, 17 years. It was a long time ago. I don't remember but episode 35, we're at 970 something now. So obviously it's 900 plus episodes ago. I talked about this in one of our, it was like a Desert Island Cinema show or something where we would list off movies that if we had to, be stuck on a desert island, what we would bring. And one of the ones I mentioned was 2001's Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts, which, like Tetsuo, very much feels like a live-action anime film. Now, I talked in the Tetsuo review, I said that there is a definite story to Tetsuo. It is surrounded by a movie that is doing so many wacky and different and unique things that you almost could miss elements of the plot. But then again, if you're paying attention, you will see them. The movie does clearly tell a story. Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts tells parts of a story. It is far shorter. It is 30 minutes shorter. It's not even an hour long, whereas Tetsuo is about 90 minutes or so. And it is far more concerned, and I think Lando would agree with this, with style over substance, meaning there are large pieces of what's going on in this movie that you will have to fill in. You get a lot of story, or at least a lot of background, I should say, on one of the main characters, but less so on the other one. And you really don't know exactly why the two of them are going to fight, specifically why one of them wants to fight the other. That is fairly vague. I did check with Lando. He didn't understand that part either, so it wasn't just me. But that really doesn't matter, because I talked about how Tetsuo borderlines on being an experimental film. I actually think Electric Dragon goes further into that territory and is partially an experimental film in that it is not overly concerned with having a coherent narrative. There are narrative elements. There is background. You do understand who one of the main characters are fairly well, but the other one is very sketchily put together. The conflict, the things that are going on in the world, some of that feels unrelated, even though it's presented as if it is. But ultimately, it really doesn't matter because, again, like Tetsuo, it is unlikely that you will experience another film like Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts. It has so much style in it. It is so excellently shot in specific ways that it really doesn't matter if it makes sense the whole way through, which it sort of does, but also doesn't. Not because it's contradictory, but because there are just large gaps in some of what's going on. And to me, that's actually easier to accept than contradictory information. So the fact that there's parts of the narrative that are missing, I will fill those in. And I will fill those in happily when I'm watching something that has this much personality to it. That's the similarity between these two movies. They are a beautiful double feature because they feel so related to one another in very specific ways. Not only because they're both in black and white, although that does help tie them, but they have this very Japanese sensibility about making what I would call, I don't know that I could call them cyberpunk. They wouldn't be necessarily that, but there is this punk rock science fiction aesthetic to them that is just unique to these types of films because of the culture that they were made in and the time that they came from. Basically, the 90s to the 2000s, these feel like products of their time, and yet they are in some ways timeless because even like Tetsuo, this movie has a lot of energy to it. There's a lot of really interesting filmmaking going on here that really does make them feel like, that, again, I pointed this out in the last review, and I would say this, I thought these were the same director at first because I hadn't seen either of them in a very long time, and they feel so spiritually connected. But in terms of story, interestingly, I think Tetsuo has a more sensical story. Its narrative makes more sense in the broad strokes than Electric Dragon does. Is that me saying that you shouldn't watch it? It is not. I would absolutely recommend this to anybody, again, who is an anime fan and can put up with having to fill in some of the story themselves. If you're okay with those two things, Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts is absolutely worth your time because, like Tetsuo, there's nothing else out there quite like it. Later.